Tonight, the desperation for civilians on both sides of the escalating Israel-Gaza war. The exchange of fire and the mounting human toll.
It's not a battlefield, it's a massacre.
The anguish of Canadian families with killed or kidnapped loved ones.
I said to my husband, they're murdering Alex. We speak
about each other, we love each other, and that's it.
And new details about the terror that unfolded online in real time. Plus, no judgment day for a former top military officer.
A great many people dropped the ball in a great many ways.
Charges stayed due to delays in a military sex assault trial.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. Day 4 since the massive terror attack in Israel. We now know of at least 2 Canadians who were murdered by Hamas. 3 others are believed missing and abducted. Tonight, Global Affairs said it is planning to send military aircraft to airlift Canadians out of Israel. The death toll on both sides is rising. Israel and Hamas again today exchanged heavy missile fire, with Hezbollah also firing rockets on Israel from Lebanon. Hamas is holding more than 100 hostages and threatening to execute them on camera. The images from Gaza are horrifying. The territory sealed off, no food, water, or electricity. A humanitarian aid convoy coming from Egypt was turned back by the bombing. And today, journalists were given a tour of the scene of a brutal massacre at a kibbutz of women, children, the elderly. CTV's Adrian Gobriel is in Israel.
A hellfire from above. Dark clouds rise as buildings collapse in Gaza. In the 75-year history of this conflict, today marks the fiercest airstrikes Israel has ever waged on Gaza City. As teams race to free people trapped under the weight of their own homes in Gaza, a constant barrage of rockets launched into Israel by Hamas, leading to multiple air raid sirens as we worked in the south of Tel Aviv this afternoon. Explosions echo through the city. People run into the shelter as Israel's air defense system shoots down multiple rockets.
Take a look at this. This just fell from the sky during the last air raid siren. We were inside the bunker. We heard a loud explosion when we came out just moments ago and touched this piece of shrapnel. It was still warm.
I thought I'm finished.
Oren Abraham was unable to find shelter fast enough when a rocket hit his Tel Aviv apartment complex on Saturday night. Bleeding, he crawled through the debris and somehow escaped with his life.
I was crawling out to beg for help. And when I went out, I relaxed because I realized that I'm alive.
Many haven't been as fortunate. Vivian Silver from Winnipeg has been missing since Saturday morning. She was speaking to her son on the phone as Hamas militants surrounded her home near Gaza.
We wrote each other up until the point she told me that they're inside the house. Just, wrote each other. We love each other, and that's it.
Those are the last words you spoke.
Yeah.
Small in stature, but a giant for peace, Silver has been an activist and an ally to the Palestinian people in the region for decades. Her whereabouts remain unknown tonight.
I heard a lot of gunshots outside her window. She was hiding in her safe room.
New atrocities are still being uncovered in the small village of Kfar Aza. The Israeli government says a number of babies were killed. It's one of 24 communities that were attacked, with many slaughtered and others still missing.
If you could say something to your mother right now, what would it be?
I just want her to feel how significant she is. I want her, to be stronger because of that. I want our love to elevate her.
Such a challenging, tragic time for so many. With the conflict growing more unpredictable by the hour, the Canadian government confirming that the military is sending in an aircraft to help airlift Canadians out of the country. Sandy?
Adrian in Tel Aviv. We're hearing more horrific first-person accounts from the music festival where 260 people were slaughtered by Hamas. A security guard at the event spoke to CTV News chief political correspondent Vashi Kapelas.
We saw them going into the shelter, throwing grenades there, live grenades inside the shelter, going inside afterwards with rifles and making sure that everyone is dead.
Two of those who were killed were Canadian. Here's CTV's Jill Makashan.
Tonight, as hundreds gathered at a Vancouver rally for Israel, a moment to honor a local life lost.
Everybody knew and loved Ben Mizrahi.
The 22-year-old was attending a music festival in Israel when Hamas militants attacked, his phone pinging his location there for days. Friends say he was last seen helping the wounded, family unaware if he was dead or alive.
And now they made it to Israel just in time to be told by the police that he was murdered by Hamas terrorists.
33-year-old Alexandre Luc was at the same event. That's him in the black shirt. The Montreal man sheltered with others, calling his mother.
The whole time he's saying to all the girls, lots of girls crying and panicking, go in the back, I got you guys, go in the back. And I hear him scream out. They're coming back, there's a lot of them. And I hear scurrying, running, and then I hear so many rifle shots.
It was the last time his parents heard from their son. Alex Luc lost his life.
He was literally our savior.
But friends called his family to tell them he had saved theirs.
On one hand, I'm very proud of my son that he was trying to help out people, you know. But on the other hand, I would have loved for him to be, for once, afraid and hide. But that's Alex.
More than 3,700 Canadians are now registered in Israel and the occupied territories, and many are growing increasingly desperate to leave.
Disappointed, even appalled at the lack of help that I received from the embassy. Almost no help at all.
And for another unidentified Canadian in Gaza, getting out is even more difficult.
Everywhere bombing sound like missiles out in the sky. I feel it now. It is not safe anywhere.
In the midst of war, Mizrahi's family will hold a funeral in Israel tomorrow, honoring a son and brother. Sandy.
Jill, thank you. This conflict may be taking place 50 years after the Yom Kippur War, but among the major differences is that this one is playing out in real time on social media. CTV's Heather Wright now on the disturbing images emerging from both sides.
This is life right now in Gaza. As Israel ramps up airstrikes, retaliation for Saturday's attack, innocent civilians are caught in the middle.
What I've experienced in the past days is like nothing I ever experienced in my whole entire life.
Plestia Al-Akwad is a journalist who has lived in Gaza her entire life. She is being told to evacuate.
Evacuate, go away. It's not safe.
But the borders are virtually sealed and there's nowhere to go. The images emerging from both sides of the border are horrific and heart-wrenching.
At first, we didn't really believe it.
Yoav Shimoni checked in with his family in Israel Saturday morning. Everyone was fine, but then a video was uploaded to his grandmother's Facebook account.
And it was a video of her lying on the ground, covered with blood. And the floor is full of blood with men with guns standing around her and shouting.
Braha Levinson lived in Kibbutz Nir Oz near the Gaza Strip. After she was killed, her house and many others were burned to the ground.
I know I'm in so much pain right now. I cannot even imagine what it's like seeing videos of your loved one being taken and being abused and tortured.
And with every image shared in real time, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, John Allen, fears peace is getting further out of reach.
I just find it all frightening, and it exacerbates the problem. What we need to do is calm people down and encourage both sides to go beyond that horrible violence and figure out ways to stop it.
Today, the United Nations called on all parties to spare civilian lives and to open a humanitarian corridor in order to get critical supplies into Gaza. Sandy.
Heather, thank you. Tonight, the first aircraft carrying U.S. military aid landed in Israel on a day President Joe Biden vehemently condemned the killings by Hamas. As CTV's Joy Malbon reports, for the Americans, it's personal.
The U.S. President Joe Biden detailing the horror of Hamas's deadly attack on Israelis, calling it sheer evil.
Parents butchered using their bodies to try to protect their children. Stomach-turning reports of babies being killed. Women raped, assaulted, paraded as trophies.
Confirming the grim news that at least 14 Americans are among the dead, with as many as 20 U.S. citizens missing that could be held hostage by Hamas. This man's mother, Adrian, is one of them.
The optimistic scenario here is that she's held hostage in Gaza and not dead on the street of the kibbutz where we grew up.
He's demanding the president bring the U.S. hostages home. Biden left no doubt it's a priority.
I've directed my team to share intelligence and deploy additional experts from across the United States government to consult with and advise Israeli counterparts on hostage recovery efforts.
The president says Israel has a duty and a right to respond to this terror, with American warships and fighter jets arriving in the region as a show of force. Biden pledged more military aid to replenish Israel's Iron Dome, the defense system that tracks and blasts incoming rockets out of the sky. And he delivered a stark warning to Iran and other actors in the region.
Any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't.
America's top diplomat Antony Blinken is headed to Israel Thursday in a show of solidarity to discuss additional U.S. support for Israel in what's expected to be a prolonged war. Sandy?
Joy, thank you. And Joy's in Washington. Well, let's talk about diplomacy. Joining us now is Ferry de Kerkhove, former Canadian ambassador to Egypt, Pakistan, and Indonesia. Welcome. When there is this much violence, is it even possible to talk about a diplomatic solution?
In the short term, probably not, because you have to have a stabilization of the situation. The diplomacy would be in the feathers of those who are still fighting. But I think that diplomacy at the end will be absolutely essential, because even to release the prisoners or the hostage, you do need diplomacy, you need some considerable effort, and you have to calm the situation.
What about the involvement of other Arab nations? Israel was in talks with Saudi Arabia. That could well have been a trigger for the terror attack. Could any of those countries help with the solution?
The country that usually helps out on that is Egypt. The Saudis are sufficiently upset by what has happened and by the attack, legitimate attack by Israel against Hamas. But certainly the Egyptian and the Jordanian are always the one we turn to. And usually they have much more influence in the process. Let's deal with those who have done it before and who know how to do it, although it's going to be much more difficult given the immense damage on both sides of the fence.
Okay, I appreciate your insight, Ferry de Kerkhove. Thank you so much. Now, people with ties to both sides of the conflict have demonstrated in Canada, but it's the hate happening online that's raising concerns tonight. CTV's Vanessa Lee reports.
Competing demonstrations across the country, with pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli rallies after days of bloodshed.
Occupation is a crime.
While these gatherings were peaceful, Ontario-based Centre on Hate, Bias and Extremism says hate is on the rise.
We're seeing a lot of online and offline celebration of the attacks in Israel, and not just coming from the far right, but from anti-Semites of all stripes who are calling for violence.
Hate crime experts are trying to determine how many of those messages originated here. In the U.S., the Anti-Defamation League says it saw a nearly 500% increase in Telegram messages calling for violence against Jews and Israelis in the first 18 hours after the attacks.
The conflict there is going to continue to spiral, and so the hostility here will spiral as well.
Some Canadians are shaken, scared for what's to come. School boards in Toronto and Montreal are offering support to staff and students. Experts say it's crucial to talk to kids about what they have heard or seen.
It's very important to ask them, what information are they getting online? Who are they following? What are the sources of that information? Are they credible? So they understand misinformation, polarization, all of the extremism that we're seeing online.
The UN Secretary General says this most recent violence does not come in a vacuum, but grows out of a long-standing conflict. He is appealing for an end to the hatred and bloodshed. Sandy.
CTV's Vanessa Lee. Coming up, no trial and no verdict. The legal fumble as sex assault charges against a former military officer are stayed. The RCMP has started a criminal investigation into the Ontario government's decision to open up parts of a protected zone for development. Backlash forced Premier Doug Ford to scrap his plan for the Greenbelt. An Auditor General's report revealed that preferred developers were tipped off in advance. 2 cabinet ministers and 2 staffers have resigned. The sexual assault trial of a former lieutenant general came to a sudden stop today without a verdict. The charges were stayed because the process took too long. Here's CTV's Kevin Gallagher.
Lieutenant General Trevor Cadieux has always denied sexual assault allegations against him, but there won't be a verdict in his case after a Kingston judge stayed the charges, citing an unreasonable delay and blaming military investigators. Someone should be held accountable for allowing 9 months to elapse before providing defense counsel with the complainant's first statement, Justice Larry O'Brien said in court.
All we can be certain of is a great many people dropped the ball in a great many ways.
Cadieux was about to be sworn in as commander of the Army in September 2021. Instead, military police launched an investigation into sexual assault allegations against him from 1994, when he was a 4th-year cadet at the Royal Military College. He retired from service, traveled to fight in Ukraine, and then returned to face charges in June 2022. The judge determined his trial wouldn't finish until mid-February, more than 20 months after the charges were laid, exceeding the 18-month ceiling set out by the Supreme Court.
I can only imagine it's incredibly frustrating for everybody because there's no outcome.
In May, former Defense Minister Anita Anand followed a recommendation to transfer all military sexual assault cases to the civilian system, leading to more concerns about delays in an already overwhelmed justice system.
The legal system, all of that is woefully inadequate in dealing with these kinds of things.
There are questions about why it took so long for military investigators to disclose evidence. The Defense Minister's office says transferring all military sexual offense investigations to civilian police is a pressing priority. Kevin Gallagher, CTV News, Ottawa.
Coming up, showdown in Saskatchewan, protesting a controversial pronoun policy for schools. Dueling demonstrations outside the Saskatchewan legislature today after the province tried to fast-track a controversial pronoun policy for schools. CTV's Alison Bamford now on the new rules that give parents the final say.
What's become a divisive issue across the country is now dividing the grounds outside the Saskatchewan Legislative Building.
My identity is not all that I am, and yet I have to come forward before legislation and act as if it is.
Several hundreds protesting the government's plan to invoke the notwithstanding clause and legislate its parental consent policy, requiring permission for students under 16 to change their names and pronouns.
As a parent of a trans child, we feel it's important that trans people, especially trans youth, have a safe space in schools if they don't feel safe at home.
This is stuff that they can't unsee. They don't understand it. This isn't about hating the other side. This isn't about the division that the government has made it to be.
The debate spilled over inside the Saskatchewan legislature as MLAs were called back to session early to discuss the pronoun policy.
It does require legislation and does require the notwithstanding clause. We've been clear from the beginning. We'll utilize those tools if necessary. Today they're necessary, and ultimately that's why we find ourselves in the House today.
The Saskatchewan government attempted to introduce the legislation, but the opposition blocked the move.
There's a need to talk about what is actually happening in schools and what is not, first of all, to make sure that we're basing decisions on facts.
The province says the Parents' Bill of Rights Act will now be introduced on Thursday. If the bill goes ahead, groups protesting the policy say they are prepared to take further action, which could include a province-wide advertising campaign. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
After the break, NHL debut in Pittsburgh, a rising star faces off against his hero. Hockey fans were treated to a star-studded opening night of the NHL season. Built up as hockey's next big thing, Canada's Connor Bedard took center stage. Here's CTV's Bill Fortier.
Connor, welcome to the NHL, man. A historic moment in Pittsburgh as the puck hit the ice between the NHL's veteran superstar and the teenager who could lead the next generation.
The start of a new era in Chicago.
Connor Bedard was drafted this year first overall.
The Chicago Blackhawks are very proud to select from the Regina Pats, the Western Hockey League.
The year he was born, 2005, his idol Sidney Crosby was drafted and played his first NHL game.
I don't want to start the game, being starstruck or anything. I kind of want the warm-up and anthem and everything to be that moment for me.
Connor Bedard on the roster. Now Bedard is widely seen as the most exciting rookie in years.
So I absolutely think he is everything that he's been hyped up to be.
Some even comparing him to superstar Connor McDavid.
It's warranted to make these types of comparisons, not because we're trying to force it, because Connor Bedard's made it pretty obvious that he's worthy of these comparisons.
He can kind of take over a game and control a game, and here he probably will be that player.
Bedard was the top scorer at this year's World Juniors, leading Team Canada to gold.
Trying to split to the fence, cuts in front, scores!
And he dominated the WHL in his final year, tallying 143 points in just 57 games. That's 2.5 points per game, putting him right on track with Crosby's and McDavid's final junior seasons. With those comparisons, the expectations for Bedard are high. If the 18-year-old feels that pressure, he's not showing it.
I'm just going to go out, play, and try to be the best version of myself, not try to be anyone else.
A talented teenager now taking on the best of the best on the world's biggest hockey stage. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
And that's our newscast for this Tuesday. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo for Omar and all of us at CTV National News. Have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow.